Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into something really quite creative today.
Yeah, definitely unique. We're doing a deep dive on a piece of music by Ryoma Maeda.
That's the one. Fantastical Symphony, a boy's late life rhapsody. Quite a mouthful, isn't it?
It really is, and fascinating.
And what we're doing here is trying to understand it by going straight to the source. So, Ryoma Maeda's own official website.
Specifically, there's a news and works section about the track, and really importantly, an interview with him about it.
Right, so our mission really is to pull out the most important bits from that material, just to give you a quick but hopefully deep sense of what this piece is all about.
You know, just looking at the site's description, it immediately paints a picture. It talks about a captivating and beautiful soundscape.
Built with grand strings and synthesizers, it says. Sounds epic already.
But then, here's the twist. It mentions the bold incorporation of drum and bass rhythms.
Whoa! Okay, so not just mixing sounds. The site actually says it creates a unique worldview, fusing classical and contemporary.
Exactly. That description alone tells you, okay, this is probably something a bit different. It sets expectations.
It really does.
And the source material also pushes this idea of a story, doesn't it? It describes a dramatic development reminiscent of watching a movie.
Yeah, like it's meant to stir your imagination, making you feel like pure fantasies of youth and the mature emotions of later years are intertwined. It's quite a concept.
Absolutely. And they don't hold back on the praise either. It's called Filled with Overwhelming Energy, a real rhapsody.
And they credit Maeda's exceptional musical sense and genre-defying free thinking. You read that and you just want to know how he did it.
Definitely. So to really get behind that, we need that interview, right? The one from the source material?
Yes. And the first question nails it, that title. Fantastical Symphony, a boy's late life rhapsody. Where did that come from?
You just have to ask, don't you? And Maeda explained it actually started with a tagline he'd been using himself for a while.
In his profile. Something like, Tita.
Exactly. Which translates roughly to Fantastical Symphony, a boy's late life musician.
So the track title basically just grabbed his own personal tagline.
Pretty much. But the story behind that tagline is layered too. He says he was inspired by something he saw on Shingo 2's Wikipedia page.
Shingo 2, the hip-hop artist. Interesting connection.
Yeah, the phrase was "duzku" of an abstract adventure company, or a young entrepreneur of an abstract adventure company.
Okay, so that's where he got the idea for something mysterious and unique. He wanted his own cool phrase.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
And he clarifies the Fantastical Symphony part. It wasn't some super deep philosophical thing, he just liked how it sounded.
The look of the words, the sound of them. Sometimes it's just aesthetics, isn't it?
Totally. It highlights how creative sparks can come from anywhere. Then he added boy, because it connected to an older album of his, Fantastic Suicide.
Right, but he's, well, obviously not a boy anymore, so the late life part.
That was deliberate. He calls it a self-aware, playful twist, adding that layer of maturity onto the youth idea.
That's what makes it intriguing, that combination.
He really does. And he says when he was actually making the track, thinking about the title, the music itself, those sweeping strings mixed with the kind of chaotic beats, it just felt like Fantastical Symphony, a boy's late life.
But it wasn't quite finished, was it? He needed one more word.
Rhapsody. He felt that captured the essence of those wild, playful beats.
And that completed the title.
Wow. So yeah, the title itself is this whole collage borrowing structure. Liking the sound of words, linking to past work, a bit of self-awareness, and describing the music's feel. Quite a journey just for a title.
It really is. Okay, so moving from the title to the actual sound, which is just as unique. The interview asks about that mix, classical, drum and bass, contemporary music. How did that specific combo happen?
Well, he explains the starting point was actually a remix he did.
Oh, right, for a string ensemble, the Maganey strings.
That's them. They gave him the initial classical string parts. So that element was sort of the foundation, naturally.
Makes sense. So where does the drum and bass come in? That feels like the more unexpected element.
He says that genre was huge for him back when he was a teenager, like mid to late 90s.
Formative years influence.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And he says drum and bass has always been his personal favorite kind of beat. But here's a key detail.
Okay.
He specifies he's always preferred slightly broken or off-kilter rhythms over standard drum and bass patterns. Not just the straight stuff.
Okay, so his own twist on it.
Exactly. And he feels that preference really comes through in this track. It's not just sticking drum and bass on top of strings. It's his specific take on its rhythm and energy.
That explains why it doesn't just sound like two things glued together. It feels more integrated or intentionally jagged, maybe.
Yeah, that off-kilter description seems important. It gives it that unique pulse.
So speaking of the actual sound creation, did the interview ask about specific gear, like instruments or software he was focused on for this track?
It did. He notes that nowadays he mainly uses Logic Pro, the software, minimal hardware.
Standard workflow for many now.
Right. But he clarifies this track was made quite a while ago. Back then, he was on Cubase.
Another music software, yeah, big in its time.
And relying more on hardware sound modules. He mentions the Yamaha motif rack specifically.
Oh, wow, classic here. So actual physical boxes making sounds.
Yeah, and he says he still loves Yamaha's piano and string sounds from units like that. For this piece, he specifically blended the live strings from the McGann strings with string sounds or patches from that motif rack.
So combining real orchestra sounds with synthesized ones from the hardware.
And he mentions paying a lot of attention to how the live and digital textures interact.
That focus on the blend sounds crucial, getting those organic and electronic sounds to work together.
Absolutely. That seems core to the track's whole character, that layering.
Okay, let's dig into the boy part again and the fantastical idea. Did the interview ask if his own childhood experiences or fantasies fueled the piece?
Yeah, they asked. And he says not directly, not specific memories or events from his life.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There is. He then describes the kind of image you see on the track's cover art, this chaotic stage scene.
Right, like an orchestra, tons of synths all crammed together, just this explosion of sound and activity.
Exactly that. And he says that image, that scene is definitely a world I've always dreamed of.
So it's more of an aesthetic fantasy, a visual idea he's had since he was a kid.
Precisely.
Yeah.
This imaginative vision of a vibrant, maybe overwhelming, chaotic musical performance that has stuck with him, and he feels it just naturally seeps into my work.
So less about literal childhood stories, more about a long-held fantasy of what music could look and feel like. That makes a lot of sense with the sound, actually.
It connects perfectly with that blend of grand classical elements and the more chaotic electronic parts, the live versus synthesized. It's the sound of that imagined scene.
Okay, one last thing from the interview. Did he point out any specific moment in the track he really wants people to listen for?
He did, and he answered pretty quickly on this one.
What did he say?
Definitely the ending, where the beat gradually falls apart.
Falls apart. Interesting.
Yeah, and he adds that kind of chaotic, playful collapse. Honestly, that's the kind of thing I love the most.
Wow. So the moment of disintegration, the breakdown at the end, that's his favorite part.
Seems so. It's a really personal insight, isn't it? What the artists themselves values in their own creation.
It feels connected to that Rhapsody idea, too. Maybe freeform, even a bit wild. And perhaps the boy's perspective, enjoying the playful chaos.
Could be. It's a strong final statement in the music, apparently.
So let's bring this all together. We've done this deep dive into Ryoma Maeda's Fantastical Symphony, a boy's late-life Rhapsody, really leaning on his website and that key interview.
Yeah, and we've uncovered quite a bit. A really unique title, tracing its roots from his own tagline, inspired by Shinzo II, reflecting on youth and maturity.
And the music itself, how the classical strings came from that remix project.
Mm-hmm. And how his love for 90s drum and bass, but specifically those off-kilter rhythms, shaped the beat.
We touched on the gear too, Cubase and the Yamaha motif rack for this older track, and how important blending those live and digital strings was for him.
And realizing that the fantastical element comes more from this long-held visual fantasy of a chaotic musical stage rather than, specific childhood memories.
Right, that aesthetic dream driving the sound. And finally, getting that tip from Maeda himself, listen for the ending. That's the part he loves most, where it all kind of falls apart playfully.
So hopefully, by looking closely at sources like this, hearing the artist's own words, you get a much richer picture, right?
Absolutely. It's not just about liking the music. It's about understanding the process, the thinking, the influences behind it. That's how you really build, I think, an informed appreciation.
It lets you listen with maybe new ears. You hear those layers, those intentions he put in there.
Exactly. So maybe as you go, listen to Fantastical Symphony, a boy's late-life Rhapsody. Or listen again, think about that title.
Yeah, that fusion. Boyhood, fantasy, chaos, energy meeting, late life maturity, reflection, maybe synthesized feelings.
What does it really mean to make a Rhapsody out of that mix? Especially his very personal take on it.
How do those past selves, those childhood fantasies or energies, and our present selves with all our experience kind of weave together in creative work?
especially in a piece that deliberately smashes together classical sounds and broken electronic beats.
Something for you to think about as you listen.